do we gather here? Why do we gather here each year under a great hill built with others who lived many, many years ago? Young amongst old, male and female, all walks of life, share something in common. But why, when war means something different to us all? Some know why it had to be, others wish we had left well alone. Some know, those who've travelled far, alive or dead. Others don't have a connection, obvious, with the names engraved on our walls. Some come to reflect, others to learn. But nevertheless, we stand, shoulder to shoulder, in blistering heat, heavy downpour, around a neatly trimmed patch of grass, united, not because of what we think or why we are here, but because of what they thought when they scrambled out over the ditch.
Kia ora tātou, and the koutou katoa. Good morning and welcome to this very, very special day of Waitaki Boys and the Waitaki Boys calendar. Welcome to Lady Elworthy, whose contribution towards the plaque is very much appreciated. To Colonel Tony Wales, our guest speaker. His Worship the Mayor, Mr Alex Familton, Mayoress, Mrs Heather Familton. Norman Foley, Oamaru RSA, John Longman, Otago RSA, Phil Wright, Chairman of the Board of Trustees, and Derek Austin, the President of the Old Boys Association. Welcome especially to our many guests, who I hope will join us for refreshments in the Baker's Suite at the conclusion of this service. Our special guests include many of the men who will be honoured today and the families of those men who are unable to attend. I welcome you on behalf of the staff and students of Waitaki Boys High School. I would like to make particular reference to Lindsay Malcolm, Rob Dick, Brian McComb, who have worked tirelessly with John Madison, the Deputy Rector, and Ken McCallum, Board of Trustees Staff Rep, to make all this happen today. I thank you all for your commitment for this day. Today we remember and give thanks for the service and sacrifice of the hundreds of Waitakians on these walls around us today. Today we remember and give thanks for the service and sacrifice of these men. We are here not to glorify war. Some politicians try to glorify war. It is generally the last thing a soldier does. They know the reality of war. Many servicemen return from war never to speak about the memories, because the memories are too painful. I've been touched by the emails I've received from old boys wishing to pass on their thanks to the Old Boys Association, Derek, for all the hard work and recognition of the old boys who served in Korea, Malaya, Borneo and Vietnam theatres of war, and the additional World War II veterans whose names we have come across and have put on the plaque as well. I would like to quote an email that I received from an ex-old boy, Brian Hunter, who wrote to me yesterday. I wish to extend my best wishes to the school for tomorrow's Anzac service. We're unable to attend, unfortunately, but are delighted with the recognition given to the old boys with military service overseas since the World Wars. These include my brother Sid, who fought in Malaya, and my wife Betty's brother, the late Morris Chittock. He fought in Korea. With my father wounded and repatriated in World War I, and two uncles serving on Gallipoli, one of them killed in action there, our family has strong school and military ties, and our thoughts will very much be with you all during this special time of remembrance. He also went on to write, "Least we forget" continues to be a deeply embedded thought in our school's fine traditions. I hope the Hall of Memories will indeed echo with pride I too hope that it will echo with pride today. Yours sincerely, Brian Hunter. I also received an email from Bill Hancock. His sister is representing him today. Welcome, Mrs. McNulty. Bill and his brother Neil, both old boys, between them, served their country well in Vietnam, Malaya, Borneo, the Thai border. Bill's brother died just a few months ago and was buried with full military honours and an SAS honour guard. Bill wrote to me the following: "Time fades our memories, but I have two clear memories of your guest speaker today, Colonel Tony Wales. One as a respected and fair prefect at Waitaki. Two, I as a 22-year-old sitting pinned down by enemy fire in a paddy field in a place called Long Green, cut off and stranded. When Tony Wales choppered in, called in artillery support, we had to fight our way out, but I would have been much worse off if he hadn't called the shots that day." A glowing tribute indeed. As I said earlier, war is not to be glorified, and as a nation, New Zealand has paid a very high price so that we might live free today. The men's names that adorn the walls about us are a memory to the sacrifice they made. In the First World War, 17,000 New Zealanders were killed with 41,000 injured. In the Second World War, 12,000 New Zealanders died, with 40,000 injured again. Korea, Borneo, Malaya, Vietnam cost the lives of a further 120 Kiwis. Today we gather in memory of all those who gave their lives, and for those who returned to live with the horror of war for the rest of their lives. I would ask you now please to stand for the poem of remembrance. They went with songs to the battle, they were young, straight of limb, true of eye, steady and aglow. They were staunch to the end, against odds uncounted. They fell with their faces to the foe. They shall grow not old, as we that are left grow old. Age shall not weary them, nor the years condemn. At the going down of the sun, and in the morning, we will remember them. Please sit. Thank you. I should just like to introduce our guest speaker, please. Colonel Tony Wales. He was a boarder here at Waitaki from 1955 to 1959, coming from a farm in Roxburgh. Head prefect and commander of the school cadets in 1959, joined the New Zealand Army and spent 4 years at Duntroon in Australia, graduating in 1963. He served in Borneo in 1965 with the SAS and Vietnam 1966 to 67 as an artillery officer. He transferred to the Australian Army in 1971 and from 1975 to 79 was at the University of Sydney studying law, and then he joined the Army Legal Group. Tony retired from the Army in 1988, the rank of Colonel, and as the Deputy Director of Corps in 1988, and joined the law firm until his retirement as a partner in 1996. He was elected the Mayor of Mount Barker in 2003 until 2006. So please have a warm hand for our guest speaker, Mr. Tony Wales.
Amazing building, and it seems shivers up my spine still. Rector, Lady Elwood, students of the school, veterans and their families, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. This is truly a special day for me as I rise to speak here at the school for the first time in more than 50 years. This Hall of Memories was erected between 1920 and 1927, with funds raised by old boys, students at the school, the school board, and there was a government subsidy. It was built in memory of those members of the school who had served and died in the First Great War, and later in wars and conflicts which no one in 1920, in their worst nightmares, could ever have foreseen. The school began its life in the reign of Queen Victoria. Built of Oamaru limestone, the hall records over all these years service, first to the monarch and empire, and as time has passed, and now more importantly, to our nation, New Zealand. And speaking of service, I do not mean just military service. Many famous men in every field of human endeavour have walked these corridors and sat on those hard old forms. More, I suspect, than those who have proudly worn the uniform of a sailor, soldier, or airman. And not only then, boys then and still become young men here and take up all the occupations that are the fabric of this society, and while earning a living and raising families, contribute to the life and progress of their communities and this nation. Their often unrecognised efforts are also to be remembered. Today, however, on the day before Anzac Day, we turn to service in the Armed Forces of New Zealand, the part Waitaki old boys have taken, and the price they have paid. Many have left this place and gone to war. The first of them, for the most part unrecorded, left for the Boer War in 1899, just 16 years after this school was founded. A horse was purchased by the boys and staff of the school. It was called Waitaki Boy, and it was given to Sergeant Frederick Henry Collis, who left for South Africa on the Monowai in March 1900. The horse was killed in action at Melbourne. Sergeant Collis returned to New Zealand unharmed, however, because he left again for South Africa, this time as a lieutenant with A Squadron, the South Island Regiment, in March 1902. He is recorded as a farmer from County Waitaki, his address as Fortification Oamaru. I must speak to the Mayor about that. I'm not sure where Fortification Oamaru was. 3 Waitakians died in South Africa and one other was awarded the Distinguished Service Order. The database records many other enlistees from Waitaki. I counted 19 as I searched as far as Collis. A student with a love of history and the tradition of the late Cuddy MacDonald, scholar and teacher of fond memory, might like to check the names of enlistees against the names of students at the school for another day like this one, but one that needs no other war. By 1914, about 1,000 boys had passed through the school. Of these, 700 enlisted for overseas service in the Great War and 119 were killed in action. 107 decorations were awarded to 78 men, of whom the most famous was Sergeant Donald Forrester Brown, who died and was posthumously awarded the Victoria Cross for Valour in France in 1916. Sir Clifford Mackenzie served with the Wellington Mounted Rifles in Egypt and Gallipoli and was blinded in action in 1915. He spent the rest of his life helping the blind in New Zealand and throughout the world. He was knighted in 1935 and died in 1966. Of the 100,000 New Zealanders who served in the First Great War, 18,000 died and 48,000 were wounded. These were the highest casualty rates of any Allied nation in that war, including Great Britain. Sadly for the school and its community, the number of Waitaki deaths among those who enlisted were the same as those for New Zealand as a whole, and more tragic if that is possible, were the then total populations of this school and the nation from which these men were taken. Despite the high hopes of peace that must have been in the hearts of those who built this place in the 1920s, another world war was to follow in 1939. It is recorded in Mr. MacDonald's history of the school that 1,200 names of old boys who served overseas have been identified. but because the number of old boys were greater, they had scattered further, and the theatres of war were so extensive, there were probably many more. Of those who had served, it is known that 134 old boys lost their lives. With the passing of the years, not all who served in the war were young men. Many became senior officers. Lieutenant General Sir Waitaki was a brigadier in Greece and later commanded all New Zealand forces on Crete, before returning to New Zealand as General Officer Commanding of all New Zealand forces. Major General R.E. Barker served in the British Army as a signals officer and was the Chief Signals Officer at the Supreme Headquarters of the Allied Expeditionary Force from 1943 until 1945. Major General Alan Inglis twice commanded the New Zealand Division for short periods. Squadron Commander, later Air Marshal Sir Roger Hughes, commanded the Far East Air Force, the RAF, in the 1960s and later retired here in New Zealand. In all, 123 awards and decorations were shared among 95 brave men. Among them was Flight Sergeant J.F. Barron, a fighter pilot who became a wing commander in 2 years. He won the Distinguished Service Order in Bar, the Distinguished Flying Cross, the Distinguished Flying Medal, and he died in action at the age of 23. Flight Lieutenant R.B. Heslin, EFC DFM, was also a brilliant fighter pilot. Shot down, he suffered severe burns and became a POW. 11 MCs and 3 MMs, and military crosses and 3 military medals were among the Army decorations awarded to old boys in that war. Later, we also added to the plaques for the Second War the names of other old boys. Norman Barrett Cooper and Leslie Thomas Whitaker, who both died in action while serving with the RAF. I have been unable to positively identify Mr. Cooper's wartime history. Flying Officer Whitaker, however, flew with 267 Dakota Squadron and is recorded on the Commonwealth War Memorial in Malta. I cannot find a record of this grave. Two other names will also be placed on the plaques today, Mr. Bill Patterson and Mr. Jim Sherwood. Both are still with us. I hope I've got this right. Jim is frail and can't be here. Bill served with the 26th Battalion in Italy and with the occupation forces in Japan. He is here today and is by far our most important guest and without doubt our oldest. Sir, it is such a privilege to have you here. We who followed you overseas stand on the shoulders of heroes. You are one of those. Before turning to the post-war era, mention must also be made of staff of the school who served overseas. Harold Hall and Fred Cribb returned to the school after the First War. Captain L.S. Jennings was killed on the Somme in 1916. During the Second War, Pilot Officer J.M. Pate was killed in action over Cologne in October 1942 when his Wellington bomber went down. Tom Hinder was killed in action in Italy. Mrs. Berry Blackmore Austin, and I am almost sure Jack Heron, my old mathematics master, also served overseas. We can't, however, forget our recruits. Jim Burrows, who was at Christchurch Boys High School old boy, I suppose we can forget him now. He was affectionately known as Gentleman Jim by his peers. He was awarded the DSO and Bar. He left New Zealand in 1939 as a captain, and by 1944 was a brigadier. A fighting soldier without peer, he commanded a company in Greece, 20th Battalion in Crete, and in 1942 led the 4th Brigade in the legendary no attack that made the breakout of Minkarquan possible. He was still serving in Italy when appointed director to succeed Mr. Milner, and he arrived at the school in early 1945. He returned to the New Zealand Army in 1949 in the rank of Colonel, later commanded K-Force in Korea, and retired as a brigadier. His successor, Malcolm Ledford, rose to the rank of Lieutenant Colonel, was seconded to the Australian Forces as a staff officer, and served with them during the New Guinea campaign. In turn, John Donaldson, rector from 1961 to 1976, served with the Royal Navy East Indies Fleet, based in Ceylon, now Sri Lanka. There are 19 names of Korean War veterans listed on this new page. This was a war of advance and retreat, with large formations fighting from trench lines often into the cold, while the foot soldier patrolled to dominate the no man's land between the protagonists. New Zealand provided a field artillery regiment, a signals troop, a transport platoon and a workshop. Actually, it was called a light aid actually, which is somewhere between a box of tools and a large truck. 16 field regiments became a legion for its accurate close support to Australian, American and British infantry, and our old boys here today served in one of those units. Korea began shortly after the end of the Second World War, and the countries that answered the United Nations call to arms were war weary. I think it was a war that the nations preferred to forget. In doing so, the men they sent to fight were also forgotten. Today we recall their courage and remember them with respect for their service. From the late 1950s, however, the character and pattern of conflict began to change and become less easy to define. Greatly influenced by globalisation, it takes a form that reflects the era, the environment and the level of technology in which it occurs. It is certainly no different to the people who live in those countries where the wars take place. For the most part, these new wars occur where development is lacking and there is significant economic insecurity, and therein lies the tragedy that is war in any age. While the world wars of the 20th century, with their horrific casualties, both military and civilian, seem less likely, we have gradually entered into an era of what is known now as asymmetric warfare, where the two continents are so different in character and in their areas of strategic advantage that confrontation turns on the ability of one side to force the other side to fight on their own terms. And the clearest example of that is Afghanistan. For those of us who served in Malaya, Borneo and Vietnam, however, whether we were soldiers, sailors or airmen, the day-to-day challenges did not seem too much different from those faced by those who went before us. At this point I'd like to mention Ian Hurd, who was with Whiskey 3. Whiskey is the mnemonic for W, and it was W Company. Whiskey 3, and it was the third company with that name. He was badly wounded. He has been wheelchair bound ever since. He now lives in Queensland, and I very much wish he could be here. Today the rest of us who were there will just quietly remember other friends who were wounded or did not return. Three old boys who served with distinction during the period were Ian Burrows, that's gentleman's Jim's son. He was a talented footballer, cricketer, athlete, boxer and artist, like his father. After Royal Military College Duntoon, he was commissioned into infantry, and in 1955 was awarded the Military Cross for bravery during peak jungle patrols in Malaya with his beloved SAS. He later commanded an infantry company during confrontation with Indonesia, land forces in New Zealand and New Zealand forces in Southeast Asia. He received an OBE in 1979, retired as a brigadier in 1985 and passed away in 2006. In 1961, Wing Commander, then Private Officer Brian Anderson, navigator with 41 Bristol Freighter Squadron, had completed 177 operational sorties on missions that dropped over £1 million of supplies over Malaya. He was awarded the Air Force Cross. After service aboard Waitaki during the 5 Christmas Island nuclear tests and royals, as a junior officer, Lieutenant Commander Lynn Tempera commanded HMNZS Stanton, a coastal minesweeper performing patrol duties during confrontation in the 1960s, and HMNZS Canterbury as a captain in the 1970s. He later became Rear Admiral Tempero and Chief of Naval Staff. He was made Companion of the Bath in 1987, died in the same year, and was buried at sea. I have recently completed 13 years presiding and sitting as a member of the Victims Review Board in Australia. This is the first peer tribunal that hears appeals from veterans or their widows against decisions made concerning entitlement to or amount of veterans' disability pension. During those years, I have heard often with deep sadness individual accounts given by veterans from the Second War to Afghanistan of traumatic events during their service that gave rise to severe and lasting physical and psychological damage. Death and the effects of war on servicemen, and as importantly, the emotional and financial consequences for their wives and families, have only been recognised by our governments since Vietnam. We've come a long way since the neurosis of the First War and lack of moral fibre of the Second. While progress is slow, it is happening as the lasting effects of war are better understood. What troubles me still, though, are the hundreds of thousands of women and children in New Zealand and Australia whose fathers, brothers and sons did not return from the World Wars, or if they did, were never the same again. Wives and mothers protected and preserved what was left of their men and raised their children, often alone and almost unaided. To them we owe a debt of gratitude that can never be repaid, and of course it is now too late. There is great comfort for many returned men in recognition afforded to them by their nation, by their peers, and in places where they lived, worked and were taught. Soon you will see that there are now 60 more names added to those old boys of the school who served before us.
Senses of war, the sight of rotting corpses, gaping wounds, endless expansion of no man's land, the flash of artillery, the crack of rifles, the cries and screams of the wounded and dying, the eerie silence of the calm before the storm, the stench of death, dysentery and latrines, cold stale sweat, the muddy, smelling, rotting clothes, the touch of your comrade as he grasped for his life, the rifle cold and heavy in your hands, the numbness of your weary limbs, the sour taste of defeat as you're forced back to your last line of defence, the longed for taste of home. These are the senses of war.
the Anzac service. Surrounded by giant, gruff old men, nothing can scare or sadden them. My proud thoughts quickly grind to a halt when the bugle echoes all about. Inside, the memories flooding back. Outside, the men's tears cause me a shock. How could something from that long ago affect all these heroes even now? Surrounded by weary, small old men, the memories scared and saddened me. My new thoughts ring in the morning air. The bugle's tune shudders to a halt.
It's my pleasure now to ask Colonel Toby Wales to unveil the plaque revealing the names of those who served, who were missed from World War II, from Malaya, Borneo, Korea and Vietnam. Colonel Wales.
Today the school records our names in this place, which more than any other, we count it an honour and a privilege to be remembered. Great privilege for me to unveil the plaque to those members who fought overseas, Korea, Malaya, Borneo and Vietnam.
Please listen. First, you need to understand that here the dead are laid in shallow graves. Precise, immaculate, of course. Names etched in tiny trenches, clean as crosshairs. Lighters whistling in the field behind the lines, a little deeper than the grass they lie. Please listen. Every year, these dead will march again inside this hall. For we who live will stage a soft parade. The name of every man who died will step into the air, a list straightforward as the alphabet. 200 names and more will move aside. The silence. Pause a moment, then make way. Aloof alike to honour or indifferent stares.
Here now are the names of the old boys and masters of this school who died in the First World War and earlier wars. A. Aikenhead, A. W. Bailey, H. Booth, A. H. MacDonald, J. A. Aiken, M. S. Bain, C. C. Barclay, C. F. Bartram, L. H. Beecham, C. C. Blakeney, D. F. Brown, J. D. Brown, W. L. Brown, W. J. Bunting, A. G. Burns, T. L. Burns, D. R. Carter, G. N. Chapman, H. J. Chapman, F. Chilton, D. Craig, E. C. Croft, N. J. Cup, J. T. C. Cunningham, T. C. Cunningham, C. A. Delator, E. Delator, G. M. Dawn, A. R. Douglas, R. Dummington, R. N. L. Duffy, E. Edwards, A. D. Elliott, W. Fairbairn, A. A. Faulkner, H. H. Field, L. Finch, A. N. Finlayson, R. L. G. Fleming, F. A. Fothergill, J. C. Fothergill, N. D. Fraser, E. H. Garland, E. Gibby, W. J. Gibb, G. Gubson, W. A. Gill, F. B. H. Guinness, L. C. Cannon, H.S. Harley, R.A. C.A. Poyston, F.N. Poyston, A. Hudson, T.H. Hudson, J. Ireland, H.M. Jackson, L.S. Jennings, F. Jones, R.A. Q, E.H. Kent, F.C. Kent, E.H.T. Kibblewhite, E.R. Leary, L.I.F. Leacham, E.I. Lee, S.J. McDonald, H.J. McKibben, J. McKinsey, R. McKinsey, G. Malcolm, G.H. Massey, J.H. Massey, L. Mathias, O. Mathias, E.G. Mellon, D.O. Mitchell, B. Lawson, C.H. Malloy, B.H. Neves, N. Nicholson, T.H. Nisbet, P.A. Onley, I.S. Corbell, W.H. Patterson, G.F. Kirsten, J.A. Porter, C.G.P. Price, W.R. Pyle, H. Reardon, W.H. Reynolds, C.G. Robinson, A.J. Ross, W.O.N. Rao, J.B. Saylor, W.A. Shannon, L.R. Scott, J. Schooler, G. Shaw, N.R. Simon, B.H. Skeet, J.D. Sloss, C. Smith, W.K. Smith, J.B. Smith, H.E. Sandra, T.L. Steele, H.K. Stevenson, J. Stevenson, I.P.D. Stockett, C.O. Strokey, A.B. Stratford Heineken, E.B. Swinley, R. Taylor, A.L. Thompson, W.A. Tyree, F.A. Rickman, S. Walls, J.E.E. Warnox, R.N. Watson, W.T. Williams, J.B. Young.
Here are the names of the old boys and masters of Waitaki who died in the country service in the Second World War. P.A. Arder, I.F. Bailey, J.F. Barron, J.F. Beatty, H.J. Benson, W.J. Lackey, A.F. Latch, H.F. Pollard, H.R. Bottle, T.L. Bowker, W.W.D. Brain, N.N. Bryan, D.G. Callender, J.R. Carlson, G.A. Carson, K. Cook, D.I. Cooper, C.S. Corson, N.B. Cooper, J.P. Cunningham, R.D. DeCosta, B.I. Dent, A.E. Diney, W.J. Dodds, L. Douglas, M.C. Eckhold, A.J. Edwards, J.B. Elliott, O.G. Evans, A.C. Feathers, G.J. Forbes, C.C. Foster, A.J. Fraser, W.D.U. Fraser, O.L. Fuller, T. Fife, C.J. Gallagher, H.D.J. Garland, C. Golding, D.I. Grant, C.T. Gill, C.H. Gunn, A.H. Bull, L.L. Harrison, G.F. Hart, J.S. Hazlitt, T.H. Hendra, K.E. Hodge, A.H. Holmes, E.G. Horton, A.J. Hull, R. Hunter, C.J. Ironside, L.H. Johnson, T. Johnston, W.F. Coucher, F.B. Couch, R.J. Kenning, F.B. Kerr, W.J. Kingham, F.M. Lang, I.G. Lawrenson, J.H.S. Lead, J.R. Lycan, N.D. Lowe, K. MacArthur, J.C.S. McDowell, W.W. McEwen, T.C. McGillivray, K.A. McGregor, L.A. McGregor, H.J. McKenzie, K.A. McLeod, I.H. McPherson, A. McWilliam, D.B. Madigan, D.L. Mellon, F.A. Mathias, G.J. Mead, J.M. Mead, G.K. Miller, A.J. Morrison, A.L. Moss, J.D.W. Murray, B.A. Neal, F.R.E. O'Connor, D.L. Olds, J.R.S. Orwell, A.M. Pape, J.M. Pape, S.E. Pepperell, F.S. Partridge, R.R. Passmore, A.D. Pearson, T.A. Peters, C.E. Ballon, L.J. Phillips, J.L.R. Plymouth, J. Reed, J.M. Rendell, J.L. Roberts, G. McG. Robertson, J. Robertson, R.E. Robertson, G.J. Roney, J.E. Sanders, E.R. Scott, F.E. Smith, G.W. Smith, W.D. Smith, I.R. Stacey, H.J. Stevenson, R. Stevenson, A.H.F. Sutherland, H.C. Tate, G.S. Taylor, J.W. Thompson, W.C. Thorbury, P.J. Typer, H.A. Trenchard, J.D. Trotter, A.G.M. Tutto, N.N. Usherwood, D.M. Walker, I.M. Walton, R.J. Watson, I.J. Watt, B.H. Webb, G.E. Weston, L.T. Whitaker, P.A. White, D.R. Wilkes, L.W. Williams, M.J. Wilson, E.B. Whittle, J.H.H. Wood, A.J. Woodgate, R.J. Wright, M. Wiley.
But each one, man by man, has won imperishable praise. Each has gained a glorious grave. Not that sepulchre of the earth wherein they lie, but the living tomb of everlasting remembrance, wherein their glory is enshrined, remembrance that will live on the lips, that will blossom in the deeds of their countrymen the world over. For the whole earth is the sepulchre of heroes, monuments that may rise, and tablets be set up to them in their own land. But on far-off shores there is an abiding memorial that no pen, no chisel has traced. It is graven not in stone or brass, but in the living hearts of humanity. Take these men for your examples. Like them, remember that prosperity can only be for the free, that freedom is the sure possession of those alone who have the courage to defend it.
Party Commander. Carry on.
Fire Party! Shoulder! Arms! Freezing! Arms! Horses! Arms! Fire Party! 3 volleys! Light cartridges! Load! Present! Volleys! Fire! Reload! Present! Volleys! Reload! Present! Volleys! Fire! Unload!
Perimeter guard. Present. Up. Shoulder. Up. Perimeter guard. Quick. Mark.